All right, let's go. Hello, everyone. My name is Carl Ramos. I am one of the Polar Fellow for here at St. Pete University. I am interviewing Mark Chilewitz here.
Hello.
Thank you for joining in.
Sure. Thanks for having me. Yeah.
So, Mark Chilewitz, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Mark Chilewitz. I work at JPMorgan Chase. I've been here for just about 30 years. I've had many different roles over the years. My current role over the last 2 years is in what we call identity and access management. Mm-hmm. So all applications that require authentication of users, including API access, has to be authenticated, right? Just like your own password access when you're accessing any application. But a lot of it could be automated through APIs and stuff. So that's what our service provides. We are an in-house identity provider.
Oh, nice.
And that's what I work for. And great combination to talk to someone in the cybersecurity world about it, because it's right up your alley here.
Yep. Thank you so much. So now let's get this started. I have one question for you. I know since you're very best in cloud, what are the key security risks associated with cloud computing?
Well, first, I'd like to just quickly say that cloud computing is sort of a relatively new concept. It's been around 10, 15 years, whatever. But today, cloud computing is just infrastructure that's not in-house. It's infrastructure that you're accessing somewhere else, right? So it's really the same thing. If I had a business and I set up a whole bunch of servers and have a little data center or a big data center, right? You need all the components. You need your people that set it up, that install all the software and manage the environment, do the wirings and all that stuff. All that stuff goes away with cloud computing. All you're doing is saying, I'm outsourcing that now. I don't need the expertise. I can now leave that to the experts, because they're going to do it. Mm-hmm. And now I don't have to worry about installing servers. I can worry about the objective of my business.
Oh.
You see what I mean?
Yes.
So cloud computing and non-cloud computing is going to be the same risks, the same way you approach it, only that instead of you being responsible for the infrastructure, mm-hmm. and even for programming, there's different levels that you can outsource. You're just merely outsourcing the same thing you had before, but now you're not worrying about it. And it's cheaper than you used to do it, because you don't need teams of people for networking, infrastructure, servers, data centers. All that goes away. You have all the same access to all that stuff, but it's just someone else is doing it. So security-wise, you're asking a lot of security questions about it. It's going to be the same whether you put the word cloud computing or not in it. The difference is, you'll see that the difference is as we get there. So first of all, the key risks associated with cloud computing you asked about. Mm-hmm. And the great thing about cloud is that because it's outsourced, it relieves you of a lot of that responsibility. So if I am going to have my infrastructure in AWS, let's say, very common, right? You have the main players are Amazon, Google, and Microsoft, and there are others, but those are the three main ones. So if I'm going to put my infrastructure in Amazon, in AWS, well, then I don't have to worry about the operating system patches, right? Yes. They're doing it. They're handling it. I don't have to think about it. Patching is a very important part of security, right? They discover new vulnerabilities, patches come out, you got to quickly get them up to speed, you got to test them with your apps, you got to up down the line. However, if I no longer have the responsibility of managing the infrastructure and the platforms, the Windows platforms, whatever they're running on Linux platforms, when patches come out, I have the trust that Amazon's just going to take care of it. So the risks for my business are tremendously reduced. The more I outsource to the cloud provider, the less I have to worry about. So the objective for cloud computing is to keep minimizing that responsibility on my business. And at the very extreme, now you could decide to have any level of cloud. Like I could have just the servers there and I can install the platform and the operating system. Or I could decide, you know what? Let them do that too. Let them take care of the operating system. Now, obviously at the hardware level, they're going to do that. That's all their hardware now, not mine anymore, right? Operating system, I could give that to them too. Great. Give them the OS. Now I don't have to worry about patches. And the security. You know what? I'm going to outsource the networking to them. I don't have to worry about some of the fail-safe firewalls they have in place. I can adjust things. I can create my own firewalls, segment my virtual environments the way I want and need. But again, I can do all of it, I can do some of it, and I can do none of it. Having cloud computing allows me now I'm going to pay more the more I have them do. But if I'm doing it, I'm paying anyway because I have to have experts. If I'm going to be in control of our own firewall, of our segmented infrastructure,
right,
then I've got to have the expertise, right, of how to manage those firewalls, how to monitor the firewalls. Right? Now, if you go to AWS and you say, you know what, do my networking too, they're monitoring the firewalls, and if there's a breach or a vulnerability, even the hint of one, they're sending you alerts. You don't even have to worry about it. So all these concerns, you have concerns at every layer of infrastructure, from the hardware all the way up through the software. The more you give the cloud company, the less you have to do. You can do any parts of it, you could do some of it, you could switch off, you could have them do partially. So the key risks associated with cloud computing are all the same for everything. You have, accessibility, trying to limit who can access your stuff and when and how. That doesn't go away. You're going to still have account passwords and things, and depending on what kind of apps you have.
Right.
But so the risks are all the same, whether cloud or not. But in the sense of cloud, the risks are dramatically reduced for the business, and it lets the business tend to the business of making their money however they do it, and managing their data.
Now, my second question is to you is, how can an organization ensure data privacy in the cloud?
Okay, you can do that many ways. There's a long list of ways that you can assure data privacy. The top level, the highest ones that are often said are, first of all, they call it to limit what capabilities people or other applications have in your system. So you can harden your infrastructure. So let's say you have a server, cloud or not, and it has all these ports. It has like thousands of ports that can access the server. In the old days, those ports are all open and you'd have to turn them off. Today, what they do is they start with a server with everything turned off. So you have no way to access anything unless you specifically turn on those ports. If you look at like an OS, a Microsoft server, for example, tons and tons of settings, configurations, all kinds of stuff. You know what? You don't need them. Either you turn it off or you even remove the software. If you're not using it, if there's no reason for you to have software that comes standard by default with the operating system, harden the system. Get rid of what you will not need and use, right? And limit what people can do. Make sure that people only have the exact permission to do just what they need to do. And that's done by granting permissions, having people in groups, granting group permissions, so when people move jobs or leave the firm, groups are automatically updated as well as those permissions. If I leave my group and join a different group, they will also pull me out of certain permission groups and maybe put me in different ones.
Okay.
So if I go in the next day, to the same app, I may see a different set of menus available to me, right? Because you want to restrict as much as possible, really down to give users and apps the minimum you can in terms of what they need to do their jobs and no more. It's like a lockdown. Same with the OSs and the servers. Only spin up or have apps running that you need. If you don't need it, shut them down, delete them, turn them off, whatever, remove them. So that's how you ensure privacy.
Now, my third question to you is, what measures can be taken to protect cloud infrastructure from cyber attacks?
Well, a lot of attacks, if you're talking about coming from the internet, there's tons and tons of stuff that you can do. You can be proactive about, right? So again, it has to do with that. That's a big area, probably most relevant to networking and firewalls. But there are firewalls also that can be set at multiple levels. So you have a firewall. Let's just say I had an application that has a server that has another thing called a proxy server sitting in front of it that's sitting inside of my company's firewall. So you have someone out on the internet, have an app that people access. So the first thing you do is they hit the company's firewall, right? So the company's firewall is going to first evaluate what this request coming in is asking for. Yeah. If they pass the test, it passes it to the link they're trying to access, which is my proxy server. Now, my proxy server is a front for my real server, right? So the proxy server says, oh, the network passed me this thing. It must be okay to some degree. Let me look further. And it looks into the message being requested or whatever app access is being requested. And it interprets it. It might validate it. It might say, wait a minute, it's asking for something that I don't recognize, and it can turn them away, right? So it might say, you know, at that point, the proxy server might reject it. Proxy server says, it all looks good. Let me send it off to the next level down, the server. Server gets it and says, oh, proxy server said this is okay. The main network externally says it's okay. So then the server gets it, and the server says, okay, this is a request for some information. Who's sending it? And then it checks the actual message for things like digital signatures, keys that need to be used, certificates that need to be used to validate that the sender's authentic. Right? Yes. Now I can keep going. There's even more levels to go through until you finally get your data. So, in answer, a long answer, sorry, to a question.
No worries.
Is to protect. It was number 3, right?
Yes.
To protect cloud infrastructure from cyber attacks, you have to have all of your network and access level protections in place, and evaluating what is being requested, as well as monitoring tools to tell you if something is being abused. Right? If I get 100 same of that request in a second, it's a red flag. Why are you getting 100? Anything more than 10 in a second should be a red flag, right?
Correct.
A monitoring tool will alert someone to that. So between monitoring tools and putting the protections in place at all the layers, that wherever your system is ultimately located deep into those levels, is how you would obviously protect things.
Okay. Now, so my fourth question is to you is, how do emerging technologies such as containers, serverless computing impact cloud security?
Well, containers and serverless are two different topics. Serverless refers to that original idea that I talked about, which was giving the giving the cloud provider more capabilities. So if I don't care about how they process my program, if I have a program, I want to run it somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really need to ask, I could ask them to set up a server and then the networking and doing all this stuff, and I can be aware of it, and I could pay for those levels that I'm giving them to manage for me.
Okay.
But if I say to them, you know what, I don't care. I have a program, I want to run it, and just let me run it without even knowing how you're doing it. That's what they call serverless. It's not actually serverless, it's just that you don't know how they're doing it, and they just charge you to run it. Right? So
yes.
it's like serverless because you're not involved at those levels. You're giving 100%, 99% to them, 100% of the running of the infrastructure in the system. You're only worried about your program running and the data you get back. So that's serverless.
Yes.
Right? And then containers are isolated environments that can have multiple isolated environments that act like a server, all running on one server. So I could have a container on my server, and I could have 10 of them, and each one of them acts like a separate server. And that's what a container is. A container contains everything: the operating system, the application you're running, and anything that goes with it is all self-contained. But you could have 100 of them running on a server. I don't know how many you can hold, depends on how big the container is. Right. So for containerization, it kind of works just like regular servers do. And for serverless, again, you're not worried. If it's a question for Amazon, how do they deal with serverless computing, because they're handling everything, that would be the question. For a business, serverless is awesome, zero input. I'm having trust that it's being protected.
Okay. Now, my fifth question to you is, what's the role of encrypted and secure cloud data application?
Well, encryption is a way to hide, to encrypt anything that's going to transverse over the internet, right?
Yes.
It's not only what moves over the internet, it's what data you also have at rest. So if I have all my data in some database, especially if it's on the cloud, what happens if someone breaches that? Yes. Right? I own my data, right?
Yes.
So there's a way you can store that data in an encrypted way. And only the holder of the key can decrypt it. So for data at rest, keeping it encrypted, if I'm the only one with the key, they could rob me, they can steal it through the internet or whoever. If they get breached, they can't do anything with it because it's encrypted. If you're sending data over the internet, if it's a web browser, you're already going to be using HTTPS, SSL. You're using a secure layer already. So if anyone cuts into your signal going to a web browser, that's why you can go to your bank and get your data. It's encrypted, and then there are additional safeguards you can put in, like a VPN connection, for example, and make it more isolated from the rest of the internet traffic. But even if it's mingled in with internet traffic, it's already by default encrypted. Nobody today sends unencrypted messages through the internet. You'll always see HTTPS on your web browser. And if you're doing other kinds of transmissions, you need to protect it with a similar kind of protocol, because that's all encrypted. And then you have your data at rest encrypted, that you need keys in order to know what it contains.
There's a little locks when you go to the computer. It says HTTPS. I see a lock there, right? Those locks?
Yeah, that's right. It's a HTTPS. HTTPS is a protocol, which is like a language that two systems agree upon.
Right.
So when you say, I want to see this web page, it sends it back to you. That's the HTTPS call. But it doesn't just send pages back to you. If you were to interrupt that transmission and collect somewhere in the middle of that transmission what they're sending,
correct,
it will be encrypted by default. And you wouldn't be able to know what it is, because you would need the encryption key to decrypt it.
Okay.
And you could actually see those keys and see what they, I mean, you could see it has a lot to do with the trust between two parties. Obviously, you want to keep prying eyes away,
Yes.
right? Bad actors away. Encryption is a way to mask all that data and only allow the people who, the key holders, to be able to decrypt it and interpret the data. So at rest and in motion are the two concerns.
Thank you. Now, there's two more last questions I want to ask you.
Okay.
Similar to all the questions I asked you before, but here is number
6, I think.
6, right? Yeah, correct. How do cloud security strategies differ for public, private, and hybrid cloud environments?
Well, obviously, a public cloud are those ones that I talked about, AWS and so forth. And that's sort of a concept right now that's changing. It's transforming right now because traditionally companies had their own data centers.
Yes.
And then these public cloud came about and they started saying, we could start saving money. So some companies might decide to fully go into the public cloud. Some might say, you know what, we have so much stuff, it's a good idea to use public cloud, but more on a limited basis for certain things or maybe new things. Old stuff still is things we have to maintain and keep in our own data center, and that would be really a private cloud in essence, right? It's like but you may also use both, which is a hybrid. You may say, for some things we'll use them, for other things we'll keep us. And there are even ways to connect your internal private cloud with the public infrastructure if you want to allow certain things to flow between them.
Okay.
So you can do it like that you can do that as well. So the strategies, first of all, are always the same for anywhere. It doesn't matter where it is. You want to protect everything, to protect the networks. Least privilege, as we talked about before, the principle of least privilege is what the word is, to limit as much as you can on an as-need-to-know basis only. Permissions to users and other applications to just what they need when they need it. And the more you limit it to exactly what they need, you're eliminating the possibility of a strike or a vulnerability, an opportunity.
Now, lucky number 7. How can an organization ensure continuous monitoring and threat detect in the cloud?
Well, there are lots and lots of amazing tools out there today. First of all, for the cloud, even AWS gives you a set of tools and monitoring and alerting that's automatic with your paid infrastructure that you're using. So right off the bat, you get a server in AWS, and suddenly you've got monitoring and you've got stuff built in, and it's basic. And then they say, you know what? If you want to step that up, so we have even more functionality and more in-depth analysis of your activity, then they start charging you. But it's okay if you need it. They have additional services that you can apply to your infrastructure that can start doing more things, smarter things. Start detecting vulnerabilities or anomalies, I should say, as they occur. And, then they have, of course, you can imagine they're a business, right? So they have the freebie stuff that you get with your server.
Yes.
Then they have the next level stuff, which gives you a lot more. And then they have the premium package, right?
Yes.
And they give you like everything,
Yes.
So you have that kind of a thing with that. So you have tons and tons of monitoring, all kinds of alerting that are available both in the cloud, and if you have your own infrastructure or internal cloud, obviously you've got to do it yourself or figure out what tools you're going to use. Someone like AWS uses a variety of tools. So there you go.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you so much for being on my podcast here at St. Peter's University of Paul Fellow. Thank you so much.
Oh, and thank you for having me.